What's good, everyone? Evan Jarvis here, and today we are going to be doing a tier list video. Today we're going to be doing a tier list video for the wizard abilities in Heroes of Hold'em. So just for a little bit of context to set the stage, the rankings that I'm going to put here are primarily focused on reg-filled, tougher tournaments, as well as the large field tournaments like the Zombie Horde. This isn't a list that's made specifically for like the 1 human, 9 NPCs or 2 human, 4 NPC games. It's going to be mostly focused on the games where you're competing against other players, other heroes who are going to have, a lot of solid spells. In terms of my expertise in Heroes of Hold'em, I finished in the top 10 on the season leaderboard. I have final tabled the huge field Zombie Horde countless times, and I've also got plenty of wins against the toughest lineups in the game. And speaking of the toughest lineups in the game, because I do enjoy playing Wizard, I play Wizard, a reasonable amount, but not as much as some of the other players. In making this tier list, not only did I put my research and my opinions into this list, I also consulted with the top ranked Wizard in the game, who has finished first place in the overall leaderboard 3 out of 4 seasons so far. And I also consulted with the game developers for their opinions on the best abilities. So know that this tier list here both comes from a little bit of first-hand experience and a lot of bit of research and talking to other top players, and also observing the way that they play, what abilities they're using in what situations and why. So you're going to be in good hands with this tier list for sure, and hopefully the information in it will help you build better wizards, get more caches, and ultimately get more wins. Let's get into it. So the first ability we have is Amnesia. 1 random hole card is face down to you for the cycle. Receive 50% extra health from any pots won during this period. And for me, this one's going to be D tier. Yes, there is the nice bonus that you can get 50% extra health from the pots won for an entire 6 hands. That's a good amount of time to get some extra health, but you're basically going to be playing your hands half blind. So to me, this seems like I'm taking a disadvantage to get a slight gain, and the penalty that I'm paying is not really worth the reward that I'm getting. Right? So yeah, interesting ability, probably useful if you have the chip lead on the bubble, or you have a big stack short-handed and a lot of players are just going to be folding. You can get that extra 50% from the pots won. But because you're effectively playing blind and it's a rare situation, I'm not a huge fan of the ability. Next up, we have Arcane Medicine. When losing a showdown, recover 60% of the pot in health. And this one is going to be easy S tier for me. I'm not sure if it's 60% of the pot. I think it has been since changed to 60% of what you invested in the pot you get back. Either way, it's a super useful spell. Healing spells are always going to be S tier abilities. They keep you in the game. They basically give you an extra life. And 60% of the pot would be better than 60% of your investment in the pot. But given all the discussion about Barkskin being the top healing spell, that wouldn't be the case if it was 60% of the pot. So I believe Arcane Medicine is actually 60% of your health contributed. Either way, S tier ability must have on any wizard build that you're making. Next, we have Astral Projection, which there was a little bit of debate around. Leave your body, allowing you to automatically call any bets for the entire hand without costing yourself health. And because it's kind of a free straddle, kind of free chips, you get a free call. I was thinking maybe it was S tier, but from talking to more players, it's going to be A tier. Some were even saying it should be B tier because of the fact that it's easy to play around, but often people aren't paying attention, or if you cast it in a situation where there are minions or NPCs involved, or just players who have good hands, often that pot's going to get really big. So the first thing that happens when you cast Astral Projection is you call the big blind for free. So right there, you're getting a free big blind. And then any additional bets that go in, you're also calling for free. So you basically free roll an opportunity at a really big pot if there are a bunch of raises or some all-ins or action like that. The one downside to Astral Projection is if someone recognizes you cast it, well, it's pretty easy for them to play. They can limp in with whatever hand they have. If they don't improve to a pair or better, they just check it down and you get no extra chips. And if they do get a pair that they think can be value bet, they can just bet any size and you'll automatically call. Granted, you're not costing yourself chips, but you are giving your opponent the opportunity to get easy chips. So it's It's got some pros, it's got some cons. Sometimes it will come down to the skill level of your opponents as to how effective it is, but I do see most wizards tend to use this ability because it is the only free chips ability that wizards have, and I'm putting it on all my wizards as well. Next we have blind. Opponents do not have the middle flop card revealed to them for the next 6 hands. This one's going to be a D tier ability for me. I do like the concept of these abilities that force your opponents to play without having information, without seeing some of their whole cards or without seeing some of their the board cards, but only hiding the middle card on the flop. It's 1 card out of 3 on the flop and 1 card out of 5 on the board. Doesn't include the whole cards as well. I just don't see it being that useful in terms of the size of the effect. It seems like a pretty small effect that we're having hiding just 1 card. So D tier for me. Next we have Clone. Before the final table, create an exact copy of target non-dragon minion, including health pool. Just take an open seat at any table in the event under your control. This one's going to be B tier for me. I don't usually use this one. It is kind of like a minion-based build, and wizards don't really do a lot of minions-based stuff. They do some stuff about stealing from minions, and we're going to go through a lot of those abilities as we get deeper into this tier list. But this one seems like it's got some utility. Often when you get deep in an event, there may still be a minion or 2 that's around that's got a good health stack, and to be able to basically get a copy of that minion has some use. Downsides are you're not able to get dragons, and in the tougher fields you're mostly going to be facing dragon minions, and sometimes all the minions are already gone by the time you get semi-deep. I wouldn't want to cast this one early, unless I was creating a copy of a minion that maybe if the buffs carry over. I would rather save this for mid game, late game. To me, it's kind of like Charm. You want to use it when you need an extra minion. You don't want to use it right away. Save it for when the value is really high. All right, counter spell. I guess it's like Charm, just a little less good because instead of stealing a minion, you're making a copy. Anyway, still going to be B tier. Next, we have counter spell. Negate the effect of any ability that causes damage to you or gives you a debuff. This is going to be A tier, and it's very close to being S tier. Honestly, because debuffs and damage spells can really throw a wrench in your plans and can really mess you up. Having a spell that prevents opponents from being able to affect your health pot, your chip stack, very useful. If it also worked for blocking the ability to change the turn or change the river, or blocking people from using Time of Madness and running a new board, then it would be S tier. But because it only blocks debuff spells and damage spells, I'm going to leave it in the A tier. Still very useful and still pretty much finds its way to every single wizard I use and every single wizard that I play against. All right, next we have Darkness. Turn and river card are dealt face down to the board for all opponents for 3 hands. Now we're starting to get a little bit more interesting, and Darkness I'm going to throw into the B tier. I was saying that I am interested in these spells that take away information from your opponents. And hiding the turn in the river, pretty useful. People can't really chase draws. If they have 1 pair that's not top pair, they don't know if they can make 2 pair or trips with it. They don't know if overcards have come off. This makes it a lot easier to play against your opponents and puts them at a much greater disadvantage than something like Amnesia did. So I think that Darkness is probably the best wizard spell when it comes to hiding information from your opponents, taking away information from your opponents. So it's going to make it up to the B tier ranking in my books. Next, we have Dispel Magic. Remove any debuffs on yourself and minions you control. This is going to be an easy A tier ability. I've spoken previous tier lists videos how important it is to be able to cleanse debuffs that have been applied to you. And if you can cleanse the debuffs on your minions, even better. When you're playing in tough lineups, this is an absolute must-have spell ability. If, however, you're playing in a 2-man field or just against NPCs who don't have abilities, then you don't need to have it on your build. But for any proper lineup, you're going to want to have Dispel Magic. All right, next we have Fireball. Target opponent takes 30% of their health pool and damage and gains the burning ongoing state until they win a pot. And the burning debuff is 5% damage per hand. I'm going to throw this one in A tier. Not so much for the burning debuff. That's a little bit of a bonus because if it lasts, 2 hands, you've done about 40% damage. 4 hands, you've done about 50% damage. But simply for the fact that you can hit someone for 30% of their health, it's pretty significant. It's a solid amount of damage. And if you're doing a fire-based wizard, a fire-based build, this is one of the spells that you're going to really enjoy because it starts the burning, it starts the inferno, and there are 2 other spells that are really going to fit into that family as well. If you're going for a pure power wizard though, that's focused on board changing and protection and manipulating, then I wouldn't be equipping Fireball. All right, speaking of fire, next we have Fiery Goblin Sapper. End of hand Sapper explodes, dealing 20% of opponent's health in damage. Winning the hand, opponents gain burning debuff for 6 hands. I'm not a huge fan of the Sappers, and this one I am going to throw on C tier. 20% damage to everyone. It's not bad. It's definitely, you know, better than 10, and the fact it hits everyone is, you know, significant. But usually when we're going for these big damage spells, there's going to be 1 or 2 players that have a really big stack, and those are the ones we want to hit for big damage, which is the nice thing about Fireball. You get to choose who you target, and the medium and small stacks won't be as negatively affected by losing 20%. So I'm throwing it in C tier. The burning debuff is obviously a bonus if it activates, but for that to be the case, you do have to win the hand, which makes it a bit of a gambit, a tougher thing to get the full activation, the full benefit of the ability. All right, next we have Foresight. The turn card will be revealed to you on the flop for the next 6 hands. And for me, Foresight, I'm going to throw into C tier. It's still good for getting information. It's going to help you with, you know, playing more confidently on the flop. Similar to a piece of equipment that lets you see the turn some percentage of the time. But between it and Darkness, I just kind of prefer Darkness. I think I'm getting a bigger benefit from my opponents not being able to see the turn or the river than I am from getting to see the turn before them. If I got to see the turn and the river before them, maybe I'm going to throw Foresight into B tier. But because it's only showing the turn and I have to get to the flop to experience that benefit in the first place, I'm going to throw it in C tier. Another thing I like about Darkness is even if we're not in the pot, those players still have to play blind against each other. So it can also really slow the action and kind of mess things up, which is fun. All right, Identify. A random hole card from each opponent is revealed to you for 3 hands. This one is going to be C tier for me. I did use it in my pre-build video, and it is fun getting that extra bit of information, but it's only 1 hole card. It's only 3 hands. It's not a game changer effect. So I'll use it if I don't have other abilities available, but it's definitely going to be lower down on the overall list. Something that's not going to be lower down on the overall list is Illusion. Replace the river card with the top card of the deck. If you've watched my Druid tier list video, you know that Stone Shaper made it to S tier, and this is the wizard's equivalent of Stone Shaper. Easy S tier. Being able to change the river and making it harder for players to river you, making it harder for players to suck out on you, because even if they do it once, you can cast the spell and they have to do it again. Really increases your odds of holding up in those crucial, critical, all-in situations. So anything that's a board changer like this is going to be ranked at the top. S tier ability, must have. Next we have Immolation, which is probably the best burning spell that the wizard has. All opponents at the table receive the burning state for 9 hands, and again, burning is 5% damage per hand. Despite it being the best burning state debuff spell the wizards have, it's still only going to make it into A tier for me. The wizard is typically not focused on debuffs for it really changing the game. It's more focused on board manipulation, changing its own cards, changing its opponent's cards, and doing the things that give it the best chance to win an all-in. Now, lighting everyone on fire can be very fun, especially if you apply 2 or 3 of these debuffs to them and you're hitting them for 10, 15% damage every hand. But from my own experience playing the wizard, and also from playing against wizards, having those abilities that give you a better chance to win the all-ins are going to be a bigger difference maker at the end of the day than slowly draining your opponents for, 50% of their health. Next, we have Mass Charm. For 9 hands, you receive Leech for any pots won by minions at your table instead of the minion's owner. And this one, like most of the minion-based skills, I would put into B tier, but Mass Charm is one that can come in really handy mid-game, late game. It's not like your typical minion-based spell that is only effective early game. So I'm actually going to throw this one in A tier. It's not always going to be usable because sometimes you're going to make it to the final table and there are going to be no minions left in play. But if you happen to be playing in a game where people are using minion-based builds, or just a couple of those lucky dragons end up making it to the end and being in the mix. Being able to take the leech from them is extremely beneficial. I played against the top ranked wizard who knew I was using a minion based build in the 2-man sit and goes. And we get to the final table where I have 3 minions. It's me and him and an NPC. And next thing I know, it's him and his 3 minions against me and 1 NPC. So not only do you get to take the leech, which benefits you, you also really handicap the person who is using that minion based build. So it's beneficial in 2 ways: that it helps you, it hurts your opponents, and as long as there's even 1 minion left in the game, you can use this. It also works on dragons as opposed to only lower ranked minions. So for all those reasons, Mass Charm is going to be an A tier ability in my books. Next up, we have Mass Transmutation. All players at the table discard 1 whole card at random and draw a replacement. Easy S tier ability. This is going to be one of those abilities that really helps you in those all-in situations. If you find yourself all in and behind, this is going to be a spell that you want to cast, because you may magically find yourself ahead after the spell's been cast. The only downside to Mass Transmutation when compared to something like Intimidating Shout is that while your opponents all lose a whole card, you lose a whole card as well. Whereas with Intimidating Shout, they lose whole cards and you don't. They're still both S tier abilities because you only need to use this ability when you are behind, and it gives you a chance to get ahead. It's not a guarantee, but it gives you a chance to end up being ahead. Also, it's cast on the turn, so you have most of the information available to you. You only have 1 card to go that could save you otherwise. So knowing, 80+% of the hand and then making this decision about whether or not you want to Mass Transmute puts you in a very strong position of power. And one of the most annoying things in Heroes of Hold'em is being there on the turn up against a wizard has Mass Transmute that's probably going to cast as they take down, and decide, okay, now it's time. Fortunately, it doesn't always hit, but it's a pretty powerful spell to have, and it allows you to combo with another spell that's going to be coming up later when it doesn't work out. All right, Obfuscate. Put 5% of your current health into the pot. Flop and turn are dealt face down to opponents and revealed the following street. It's kind of fun. It's kind of a fun ability. And you get to use a pre-flop. That's actually pretty interesting. I think initially I thought this was a D tier ability, but it actually feels like it could be in C tier. If you're in, I'm just thinking of the situation where it really works. You'd want your opponents to be in for a big pot, maybe all in, and then you'd need an extra 5% to be able to cast it. So if you're one of the shorter stacks, they have you covered, this isn't really going to work. But if you're one of the bigger stacks, then even still though, if they're all in, they don't really care what the board is. It would prevent them from using their magic effectively. It would prevent them from using their spells effectively, as opposed to messing with their betting. If, however, someone puts in most of their chips, but not all of them, and there is still betting behind, this could also mess with them. So I think there are some spots where Obfuscate could be pretty fun. I'm going to leave it in C tier for now, and as long as my list balances out, it'll stay there at the end. Because I haven't personally used it, but reading it and the descriptor, I could see some situations where this is pretty useful and pretty fun. Like, for example, someone wouldn't know whether they should Mass Transmute or not because they don't know what the board is. And that's kind of a fun situation to put people in. All right, next we have Planar Curse. All opponents have 1 random whole card unrevealed to them for the next 4 hands. Kind of fun, but similar to Blind and similar to Identify. It's only 1 card. It's not going to be a massive game changer. It's not a massive information loss, and it's only 4 hands. So I'm going to throw that in the D tier. All right, next we have Pyrotechnics. Make a pot size raise. Any player calling receives the burning state until they win a hand. So here, it's kind of whatever. First off, the pot size raise, we have to pay that raise. It's not free chips. If it was a pot size raise for free, this is going to be a better ability, but we have to pay that bet. We have to have a pot size raise behind to be able to cast this ability in the first place. So if we're short on chips, we can't even cast it. And then the burning state only lasts until they win a hand. So it's not like you're guaranteed 6 hands or 9 hands. You're only guaranteed 1. And I'm pretty sure if the opponent who calls you wins this particular hand, they don't get the burning state anyway. So for all those reasons, this is going to be a D tier ability. I do love the image. And the idea is fun, but in terms of the actual execution of it, the ability, I don't think it's all that great. Okay, next we have Ray of Frost. Opponents at your table give you all their leech for 6 hands. And this was one that, again, I thought initially was D tier, but I've seen in some lineups, this can be very powerful. So the same way Mass Charm allows you to take all the leech from your opponent's minions and have it work for you, Ray of Frost does some of that as well. It doesn't last as long as Mass Charm, but in addition to it working on your opponent's minions and getting their leech, it also works if you're playing against a Necromancer who's cast Hex. I'm pretty sure Hex would count in the category of leech, so to be able to cast Ray of Frost and suddenly take a Necromancer's leech, that could be a crazy amount if they've used Flayed Skin a couple of times, can really generate a lot of health for you. So Ray of Frost originally was in my D tier, but after seeing the top ranked wizard use it effectively, same as I saw with Mass Charm, I realized I should rank it a lot higher. Not all the way up in A tier by any means, but definitely a solid B tier ability. It's again kind of the wizard's counter minion build. One of the counter minion build abilities. All right, sleep. All minions controlled by opponents sit out for the next 6 hands and gain the burning state. So they're going to lose about 25-30% of their health. This one I'm going to put D tier. Minions aren't really that dangerous anyway. You'd often rather have the minions in play than not in play because they're a good, easy source of chips. Being able to take some of their health down, that's great. But using spells that allow you to take their leech instead, I find to be much more effective. So for those reasons, I'm going to put sleep in D tier. All right, temporal displacement. You and all bets you have made so far are removed from the hand. Next hand, your previous bets are added to the starting pot. Where do we want to throw this one? I think I will chuck temporal displacement in the B tier. I would like it better if it could be cast on the turn or on the river, but even at the flop ability phase, you've seen, 5 out of 7 cards, your 2 hold cards, the 3 on the board, and you've seen what the action is on the flop. So it's like a delayed saver in that if you think you're going to lose this pot and this pot's really big, okay, you can postpone things until the next hand. You're still going to find yourself all in or playing a big pot on the next hand, and it's kind of up to the poker gods and up to chance whether or not you'll have a decent hand. But the fact that it can save you from elimination and it can be used when you are all in, I do think it has some benefits. So if you're out of your other spells like Mass Transmutation and Illusion and Transmute Self, which we have coming up, it can be kind of one good last ditch effort to help you survive one more hand. Or if you find yourself in a situation where you're just so dominated that you don't think a Mass Transmute could save you, but you're going to be in more likely to be in better shape with a random hand against a random hand, you might cast Temporal Displacement, move this all into the next hand, and then get ready to use your magic in that spot. So I don't see it often equipped because the S and A tier abilities are usually the ones that players choose, but I definitely see it having some use, especially if you don't have access to all the S and A tier abilities. All right, next we have Time Warp. If you have previously folded, you may re-enter the hand by paying all missed bets, deactivate it if cards are turned up. This is going to be a B tier ability for me. Being able to hop back in hands, very interesting, very fun. Fact that it is on the flop as opposed to the turn makes it just slightly less good. I have seen a lot of wizards have this equipped. I haven't really seen it being used that much in game though. But if you would have got lucky and flopped a flush or a straight or a sneaky 2 pair, being able to get back in the action and win that pot is pretty useful. Wizards have a lot of spells that change the later streets and change their opponent's cards and change their own cards as well, but not so many that allow them to just power up in big pots on the flop like warriors do, for example. So this is a nice ability to have in the mix that can enable you to hop in there and win a big pot early game, almost guaranteed kind of thing. All right, Transmute Self. Discard your hold cards, draw 2 new hold cards. This is an S tier ability. It's not a guarantee like Time Warp because you're getting rid of 2 cards and getting 2 new cards, but it is a really good spell for saving yourself on the later streets if you're all in and behind. Based on, so these are kind of your 3 main spells that you can use to save yourself as a wizard. Illusion, Change the River, Mass Transmute, where everyone loses a card and gets a random one, and Transmute Self, where you get rid of your 2 cards and get a new 2 cards. And the decision really comes down to, if you're on the river, you're choosing between Illusion and Transmute Self. it kind of comes down to the math, right? If your opponent rivered you and they hit a 9-outer or a 6-outer or a 4-outer or a 2-outer, it's easy. You would cast Illusion and make them try to hit it again because the odds of them hitting are, you know, less than 20%, or in some cases 5%, pretty slim. With Transmute Self, you basically look at, okay, if I get 2 new hole cards, what are the odds I'm going to make a half decent poker hand here, a pair better, call it 50% or so, and what is my opponent's hand? If your opponent's hand is ace high, Transmute Self is going to be a pretty useful spell to cast. If, however, your opponent has, you know, top pair, top kicker already, Transmute Self not going to have as great odds of success. If it's the only thing you have left and you're all in, you're definitely going to want to use it. But in terms of when to use Transmute Self, typically comes down to how strong is your opponent's hand, and if you get a random hand, what are the odds you're going to draw something better than what they have. I have seen this save Wizards so many times in huge all-in situations, and it's an extremely powerful ability to have. Definitely equip it every time I'm playing Wizard. Next we have Trial by Fire. Opponents choose to either show both hole cards or gain burning debuff for 8 hands. And this one I am going to put in C tier. It's one of those spells where your opponent gets to choose whether or not they're going to be affected by it, and they'll usually know what's worse, giving away information this one hand or getting burning for 8 hands. I do like that the burning debuff lasts 8 hands. It is a good amount of time where we can do a good amount of damage. But the fact that some of it is in your opponent's control and they have some decision-making power in the situation makes it less appealing for me, and that's why it's going to be C tier instead of maybe a B tier. All right, next we have Visually Impaired. The middle flop card and turn card are not revealed to opponents for 3 hands. So this is kind of like Amnesia, but better. Instead of them just not getting the middle card on the flop, they're also not getting the turn. Similar ability, slightly better for obvious reasons. It's going to find its way into C tier. Next we have Wheel of Fortune. Reactivate 2 random exhausted abilities. This is going to be S tier. Anything that gets you spells back is obviously going to be ranked super highly. Prior to the patch, this used to be reactivate 2 target exhausted abilities where you could choose which 2 it was, which made it like we would have had to make a tier above S tier for Wheel of Fortune because it was that much better than every other ability in the game. Not only did it give you 2 abilities back, you got to pick which ones they were. I know you're a wizard, but that's still insane. So now that it's 2 random abilities, still extremely good. There's no other ability or piece of equipment that gives you 2 abilities back at once. But because it's random, it's now fairly S tier and not superstar above and beyond S tier. Definitely a must-have on any wizard. And if you plan it out where you know which 2 abilities you want to get back, and you use those 2 abilities early prior to casting Wheel of Fortune, you can guarantee that those will be the 2 you get back because it's going to pick 2 random ones. If you only have 2 that you've used, you're guaranteed that those will be the 2 random ones that it picks since it can't pick itself. All right, and finally we have Wildfire. Target gains burning debuff for 9 hands. Players adjacent to them also catch fire for 6 hands. So this is like Immolation, just not quite as good. Immolation hits everyone for 9 hands. Wildfire hits, let me just make sure that it's not 6 hands. Yeah, 9 hands. And then Immolation hits, and then Wildfire hits one of them for 9 hands and the 2 players beside them for 6 hands. So if you're trying to stack burning debuffs, if you're playing a fire-based wizard, you're going to want to have Immolation hit everyone for 9 hands, 5%. Then you're going to want to go after, you know, your primary target for another 9 hands. So they have a double burning debuff and the 2 beside them get it for 6. And then you'd hit someone with a fireball. So they might have triple burning debuff, losing 15% health until they win a hand, and then 10% until the debuffs are gone. Ideally, if you're going to run this, you wouldn't target someone who has a cleanse debuffs ability. Or if you are, you would kind of do the drip strategy where you cast Immolation, let them burn for a while, see if they cast their debuff spell or not. And when it's going to run out, if they haven't, then hit them with Wildfire. And you'd kind of hit them one at a time. So you hit them 5% per hand, but it's going to last like 20, maybe even 25 hands. Because if you cast them all together, they'll just cleanse the debuffs and it's all gone. But if you drag it out, they have to decide, okay, do I cleanse the debuffs now? Or he's going to hit me again. Okay, well, I'll wait until he casts both. Oh, he hasn't casted the second one? Okay. And then that way you actually get the benefit of, you know, having most of the effect hit them, rather than them cleansing all of them in one shot after, you know, 1 or 2 hands once you unleash the gauntlet. So hopefully that extra little tip there helps you with planning out casting debuff spells. This also carries over to other classes as well. But that's going to do it for this tier list. So this has been Evan Jarvis for Heroes of Hold'em. I hope that you enjoyed this tier list. I hope that you learned some things that are going to help you make better builds with your wizards. If you have any thoughts on the tier list, whether you have agreements, disagreements, you think something should be ranked higher or something should be ranked lower and you want to let me know why, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your feedback and learn from you as well so that I can build better wizards too. Ultimately, between the video and the comments and the discussion, I hope that all this information helps you build better wizards, get more caches, and ultimately get more wins. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, you know what to do. Take what you learned, go out there and get stacking.